Imagine standing in a courtroom, your life hanging in the balance. The prosecution has evidence stacked against you, witnesses ready to testify, and the jury watching your every move. You didn't commit the crime, but you know that proving your innocence feels like an impossible battle. What do you do? This episode on Bloodspot tells the story of Henry Alford, a man who found himself in this exact position in the year 1963. Accused of a murder he swore he didn't commit, Alford was forced to make an unthinkable choice. A choice that would not only determine his fate, but also change the legal system forever. This is the case that gave birth to the Alford Plea, a controversial legal maneuver where guilt and innocence collide in a gray area of the justice system. But how did Henry Alford end up here? Let's go back to the beginning of his story to uncover the life, the crime, and the legal legacy he left behind. Henry Alford's life was marked by poverty and a tumultuous upbringing in North Carolina. Born in the late 1920s into a working-class family, he had little access to education or opportunity. As a young man, Alford became familiar with the legal system, not as a lawyer or lawmaker, but as a frequent defendant. His criminal record included charges of assault and other violent offenses, painting a grim picture of a troubled individual. By 1963, Alford found himself at the center of a murder investigation. He was accused of killing Nathaniel Young, a man he allegedly shot during a domestic dispute. The crime took place in Reidsville, North Carolina, a small, close-knit community where violence of this magnitude shocked the residents. On the night of November 22, 1963, Nathaniel Young was found dead from a gunshot wound. Witnesses reported hearing loud arguments and seeing Alford near the scene of the crime shortly before the shooting. Investigators quickly zeroed in on Alford as the primary suspect. The evidence against him was compelling. Multiple witnesses testified that Alford had threatened to kill Young in the past. Some claimed to have heard him say he would shoot Young if their paths crossed again. A firearm matching the caliber of the bullet that killed Young was later connected to Alford, though its direct connection to the crime scene remained inconclusive. Despite this evidence, there were notable gaps in the investigation. No eyewitness could definitively place Alford at the scene of the murder, and there was no physical evidence tying him directly to the crime. Nevertheless, the circumstantial case against him was strong enough to warrant charges of first-degree murder. In the 1960s, North Carolina law mandated the death penalty for first-degree murder unless the jury recommended life imprisonment. This meant that if Alford went to trial and was convicted, he would almost certainly face execution. Alford's defense attorney recognized the uphill battle they faced. The prosecutor's case, while circumstantial, was bolstered by community sentiment and Alford's history of violence. Alford himself maintained his innocence, insisting he did not kill Nathaniel Young. However, he admitted to being present near the scene, a statement that further complicated his defense. The pressure mounted as the trial approached. Alford's attorney began negotiating with the prosecution, who offered to reduce the charge to second-degree murder in exchange for a guilty plea. This would spare Alford the death penalty and likely result in a prison sentence instead. On the advice of his attorney, Alford agreed to plead guilty to second-degree murder. However, he did so under an unusual condition. He continued to assert his innocence, claiming he only accepted the plea to avoid the death penalty. In court, Alford told the judge, "I'm not guilty, but I plead guilty to avoid the electric chair." The judge, after reviewing the evidence and considering Alford's statements, accepted the plea. Alford was sentenced to 30 years in prison for second-degree murder. This marked the first instance of what would later become known as the Alford Plea, a guilty plea where the defendant maintains their innocence, but admits that the prosecution's evidence could likely result in a conviction. Alford later appealed his conviction, arguing that his plea was not voluntary. He claimed that he had been coerced into pleading guilty by the fear of execution, which rendered his plea invalid. The case eventually made its way to the United States Supreme Court in 1970. In a landmark decision, the court ruled 6-3 in favor of upholding Alford's plea. Justice Byron White, writing for the majority, stated that a guilty plea could be valid even if the defendant maintains their innocence, as long as it is made voluntarily and with full knowledge of the consequences. The court emphasized that the strong evidence against Alford supported the acceptance of his plea. This ruling solidified the Alford plea as a legal option in the United States. After his conviction, Henry Alford served time in prison and was eventually released on parole. Little is known about his life following his release, but his name remained etched in legal history. The Alford plea became a controversial, yet frequently used legal tool in the years that followed. Over the decades, Several high-profile cases have involved defendants using the Alford Plea. In 2011, 3 men convicted of murdering 3 young boys in Arkansas entered Alford Pleas to secure their release after spending 18 years in prison. They maintained their innocence, but acknowledged that the state's evidence could result in a conviction. The subject of the popular documentary The Staircase, Peterson entered an Alford Plea in 2017 for the death of his wife, Kathleen. He maintained his innocence while accepting a reduced charge of manslaughter. The Alford Plea remains a polarizing subject in the legal world. Critics argue it undermines the principle of accountability, allowing defendants to avoid fully admitting guilt. Supporters, however, see it as a pragmatic solution for defendants who face overwhelming evidence but maintain their innocence. Henry Alford's case is a sobering reminder of the complexities of the justice system. It forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about guilt, innocence, and the lengths people will go to save their own lives. Whether you view the Alford Plea as a necessary legal tool or a loophole, its impact on American jurisprudence is undeniable. What are your thoughts on the Alford Plea? Do you think it serves justice, or does it complicate our understanding of truth and accountability? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the origins of the Alford Plea, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories on Bloodspot. Thanks for watching.